The Pashtun and Blue tribes living along the different land have been provided with 1.5 hundred-year-old cantonments for British forces in the region, fortified forts along the border, and even the best facilities for military training. It is clear from the establishment that Britain had made all these arrangements to compete with Russia. The full control of the British Crown over the subcontinent had not yet been established, and it was the East Indian Company that protected Indian British interests. While dreaming of reaching the British, took the initiative to the west of India to block the realization of this dream and invaded Afghanistan in July 1839. After a year and a half of war, Britain suffered its worst defeat in October 1842, the most notable of which was the killing of 20,000 British soldiers at the Elphinstone Company in Kabul. Britain opened the Crimea front to end its defeat and prevent Russia from reaching the shores of the Bosphorus. Here the situation was different and Britain won in Crimea, after which Britain invaded Afghanistan again in 1878, but this time too it had to face failure. Now that the two powers had claimed down and World War I had begun, this time Russia was caught up in a military romance between Britain and France, under which it was promised a monopoly on the Black Sea after winning the war. It will be handed over to Russia, the Bosphorus will be under its control, and its flag will fly over Istanbul. In this war, most of the troops fought on the side of Russia, and Russia also suffered the most losses. In this war, the population of Ukraine was divided into two parts. 3.5 million sided with the Russian army, while only 2.5 million fought on behalf of the Austro-Hungarian Empire on the Ukrainian front. 324,000 Austro-Hungarian soldiers were killed, 220,000 were wounded, and 250,000 were taken prisoner, while 250,000 Russian soldiers were killed and 40,000 were taken prisoners. Russia took such a heavy toll and occupied Ukraine, angering its ally Poland that has reached the shores of the Black Sea overlooking Istanbul. Now it was time for the promise to be fulfilled. If France and Britain had helped Russia get Istanbul, then Russia would not only have a maritime problem today, but it would have become a huge naval power at that time. Here British manipulation, cunning and secretive activity showed their work. The main role in the British project was played by Zionist Jews from Russia, Ukraine, Britain and Europe. Karl Marx, who was of Jewish descent, but his communist movement had created a wave of awakening not only in Europe but in the working class all over the world. Under the Communist Manifesto, the movement's strategy was to organize workers and seize power by forces in order to establish a government that is free from private property and in which everyone has an equal share. Seizing power by popular force has never been so easy. This is possible only if the insurgents have access to weapons, shelter and, to a large extent, the support of foreign force or the government. The time has come for the promise to be fulfilled with the Tsar of Russia, and the British have secretly asked the Jews of Russia and Ukraine to become the vanguard of the Bolshevik Revolution. Zionists from France, Germany, Austria, and other countries also joined the Jews of Russia. MI6 was the mastermind behind the operation. In return, Britain promised to resettle Jews in Israel under a secret agreement. Lenin and Trotsky revolutionaries were practically sided with the Jews of Russia, and France and Britain withdrew their troops from the battlefield in the guise of communist revolutionaries, resulting in the October 1970 Communist Revolution. The Wind and the Tsarist regime were overthrown. His entire family was brutally murdered. Wealth and resources were taken away from every Russian capitalist who dreamed of trading through the Black Sea. When the Communist Revolution came, he was the first to declare that the war should be for the Communist Revolution only. And since the present war is a war of monarchies, Russia is announcing its withdrawal from this war. All that is left now is the ruler who reminded them of the promise to hand over Istanbul to Russia, leaving behind the Orthodox clergy who had been expelled during the region of Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror and who were constantly dreaming of their return. He was treated badly by communist revolutionaries. All churches throughout the Soviet Union were locked. The cross hung, but there was no one to believe. There were church bells, but no one to ring. After the Communist Revolution, the war for power in the Middle East, which began with the Crimea War, was now claimed by France and Britain, who tore the Ottoman Caliphate into pieces like a cake. Hijaz, Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, and Iraq came under British rule, while Syria and Lebanon came under France control. In connection with this great secret work, on November 2, 1917, British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour sent a secret letter to the famous Jewish family Rothschild confirming the promise and saying that Britain recognized that all Jews living around the world are one. They are a nation and they have the right to return to their homeland of Palestine from where they were expelled in 70 AD, and the British Crown will fully support them in this regard. Most of Russia's Jews were resettled when Israel was formed on May 14, 1948 in connection with the Communist Revolution, the overthrow of the Tsarist regime, and the separation of Russia from the Bosphorus conflict. In the first few years of its existence, Israel seemed to be part of Russia. The history from these betrayals and deceptions to the present day in a history of modern day conflict and the Cold War. As long as Russia was happy with the implementation of its communism, it was not disturbed at all. As they entered the fourth, Britain reminded its allies of the promise it had made to Russia and other allies behind the scene in the wheat deal, which made Afghanistan an independent state. The announcement was that if Russia crossed the Amu River, war would break out. Russia crossed the Amu River in December 1979, and the whole world fell on it and defeated it to such an extent that its parts were divided. During the recent Ukraine war of 2022, the same 40-old wounds have been healed in Russia today and in every special and common one. Only one concept is so deep, the same slogan resound, that as long as Britain exists in this world, we a Russian peace can't live with.